What's up guys? I know a lot of you have been waiting for today's video, and we're going to be doing a bike check and full review of my 2020 Canyon Spectral ON. I'm super excited to tell you guys about my full review and what I think of the bike, so let's jump straight into it. I've had my Canyon for about a month and a half now, and I've gotten a ton of riding in on it, so I've really come to learn the bike, and I have been enjoying the heck out of it. As you may already know from what you've seen in my other videos, I've done some upgrades to my Canyon, so let's jump straight into those upgrades. First things first, we swapped out the fork from the original 150mm Fox 36 to a RockShox Zeb Ultimate, and now it's 160mm, and this fork is beefy. This bike can dominate through a rock garden. It is so confidence inspiring. I never get bounced offline. It always feels amazing. It's fantastic. I've really been enjoying it, and it significantly changed the geometry from the factory settings. From the factory, this bike came with a 66.5-degree head angle, and now with this fork on it and the longer axle to crown, this bike now has closer to a 65.5-degree head angle. So it's a lot more confidence inspiring on the downs. However, that did result in raising the bottom bracket height. I can definitely tell a difference there. I wish that I could get the bottom bracket a little bit lower again for nicer cornering, but I'll take it. That way I can have this nice beefy fork up front. Moving on from the fork, I've also swapped out the shock on this bike, and this is different than when I had the bike reveal video. In the bike reveal video, it was an air shock, and as you can see now, I've swapped to a coil. This is a Marzocchi Bomber, and it has a Cane Creek progressive coil on here, and I gotta say, it feels great. However, there is one issue, and that is Canyon actually says you can't run a coil shock on this bike. As you can see, I've done it, but it took some learning. The suspension kinematics of the frame is too linear. I was blowing through all the travel on my linear spring, and in addition to that, I wasn't running proper sag. It was like 15%. It didn't feel good at all. I was sitting really high in the travel. But with this progressive spring, it's 450 pounds to 550 pounds. So it ramps up as I go through and get to the end of the travel, and that helps to prevent bottom outs. So it feels really nice, and I'm sitting right at about 25% sag. So it feels pretty good when I'm rolling down the trail. Now that we covered the suspension components, let's talk about the next most interesting aspect of my Canyon Spectral, and that is it's a mullet setup. So we got 29-inch wheel in the front, 27.5-inch in the rear, and this is the first time I've ever ran a mullet bike before, and honestly, it feels pretty good. The 29er up front eats up all the chunk, and then the 27.5 in the rear, you can definitely tell that smaller wheel is back there when you're going through the corners. The bike just wants to lean in and tip into the corners faster, and the rear end kind of comes around a little bit quicker while you're going through berms and headed down the trail. So really interesting, definitely takes some getting used to. Mounted on both of my wheels right now are 2.5-inch Maxxis Assegai tires, and these are actually max grip downhill casing tires. I'm not certain that I love them. I can definitely feel the rolling resistance. The grip is great, of course, but the rolling resistance is really obvious. So I've got another set of tires that I plan on swapping this over to, and I'm gonna toss some tire inserts in there. That way I can run Exo Plus tires with tire inserts and have the same type of confidence that my wheels and rims aren't gonna be damaged, and that they'll be able to hold up to the aggressive riding style that I have, as well as the heavier weight of the bike. Moving on from the wheels, let's talk about the drivetrain components. This bike is completely different than my enduro bike, my Scott Genius. That is all Fox suspension with SRAM components, and now I've made a huge change in that everything is Shimano. So for the drivetrain, this is a Shimano XT 12-speed drivetrain, and Shimano was a little bit late to the game with their 12-speed, but I gotta say, it is really, really nice. I like their 12-speed a lot. It feels super good. 10x51 tooth in the rear, so you can really spin it out on those climbs. And it's super cool that they're able to use the exact same drivetrain on an e-bike, and that it still has the strength and durability to hold up to those extra forces that are going through the drivetrain because of the motor. Speaking of the motor, this is the Shimano Steps motor. So it's not the new EP8, and it's the 504 watt-hour battery, again by Shimano. And as you can see, it's integrated, so it's stored here in the down tube Can't even see that the battery's in there, but it's got a little cover here on the bottom of the down tube that you can remove and pull out that battery if you needed to. No complaints from me with the motor and battery combo. The range is definitely more than sufficient. I can get out there for many hours and climb a ton, and the bike can handle it. I wasn't too particular when it came to the exact components that were going to be on the e-bike that I was looking for. I was primarily just looking for the best value that I could find and the most value and the most bang for my buck. I wasn't too concerned about having the latest and greatest motor or battery technology. I just wanted an e-bike and wanted to get out there and explore all the awesome trails and make more content for you guys. That way you too can get out there and explore the same trails. All right, now that we covered the motor and the battery, let's go ahead and move on to the cockpit. So here on my cockpit setup, I've made a couple changes already from when I first got the bike, and you guys know me. I love carbon handlebars. That's what I learned on my Genius. Carbon handlebars are absolutely essential. So I swapped out the aluminum bars that came on this bike for some nice Raceface 6C carbon bars. I used to run these on my Genius. It's a 10mm rise, 780mm width, but I actually swapped over to a higher rise bar on the Genius. For this particular bike, I noticed the stack height on it and just the overall height of the handlebars, and I felt like I was riding super high all the time. So the first thing I did was slam these handlebars down nice and low, and now it's feeling really good. The reason I wanted to get my handlebars down lower is because when I'm riding up high, it feels pretty nice going through technical terrain, but when I'm going through corners, I just feel like I don't have any sense of feel for the front end and the grip that I have through my tires. So by getting the handlebars lower down, I can really force and drive my tire into those berms and get around the turns quick. And as I mentioned, this bike is completely different than my Genius with the components. So just like the XT drivetrain, I also have Shimano's new XT 4-piston brakes. Well, relatively new. Typically, I'm a SRAM guy all the way when it comes to my brakes, codes in particular. I love the stopping power and the modulation and overall feel of SRAM brakes, but I'm trying to get myself to like Shimano. So I'm really excited to be getting more seat time in on these brakes, and the stopping power is definitely pretty good. I'm not certain it's as good as SRAM codes, but the modulation, it simply doesn't exist. Anyone who's compared Shimano versus SRAM, they know the deal. Shimano's a lot more on-off when it comes to that braking feel. However, I've really been getting used to it. It doesn't bother me nearly as much anymore, and I've been enjoying the brakes overall. There's one strange thing though when it comes to these brakes, and that is the bite point. I've noticed while I'm descending that bite point, it seems to kind of float and move, and it adjusts where I need to be pulling the lever to in order to get maximum braking. But I've read on some forums that people are experiencing similar issues and that the bite point just kind of floats and moves. Hopefully I can get something figured out with a bleed or whatever it may be, and we can resolve that. While here on the cockpit, we also of course have the e-bike specific components, and that includes the digital display that can show my speed, my battery life, as well as the current setting that I'm in. So I can flip this switch right here on the right hand side and it'll change the mode that I'm in. So I can go from boost to trail or eco, and then I can also turn it off, and if I hold it down I can change it to walk mode. So then I can push the button and it'll slowly propel the bike forwards. So if I'm just walking along or doing some hike a bike, it'll help me in order to get to the top, because the bike is after all almost 53 pounds. And then right here I've got a pretty neat little feature. I can flip this flap open, and now I've got a charging port right there. So if I needed to charge up a phone or a light or anything like that. If you're not familiar, these types of e-bikes, they're all pedal assist. So they only provide power while you're pushing onto the pedals. As you push, they provide a little bit more based on the setting that you're using, and that's what helps to propel you to the top at a quicker pace. And then of course, while we're on the cockpit, we also got to mention my dropper lever and my passion for 1UP and their 210mm dropper posts. Put them on all my bikes because I've got super long legs, and this is what I need, helping to get get that seat out of my way when I'm trying to crush down descents. I've got the 1-up remote, super smooth actuation, and I love it. 2 more subtle little features on my Spectral is a sweet little integrated seat clamp. I really like that a lot. Just 1 bolt that goes directly in. And then over here on the non-drive side, you also have this little flap that opens up, and it's your charging port for plugging your bike in at night. This bike, it takes a while to charge up. It's usually 7 to 8 hours. So you pretty much just charge it overnight and then you're good to go the next day. You can charge e-bikes intermittently without having to worry about damaging the battery long term or anything like that. But if you charge it up for only an hour or 2, it doesn't give you a whole lot more range, and it's really best to just try to give it that full charge. If you're trying to get a whole lot of laps in, or a ton of elevation, a ton of distance, the best method would just be buy a second battery, and then you could do a quick battery swap to get you through the second half of your day, and it'll keep you rolling on your way. But as far as range goes with this, I've done a number of rides now that I did about 25-30 miles, 4,500 plus feet of climbing, so you can really do a lot, and usually by the time I'm done with that, my body's feeling pretty sore and tired anyways. So this bike's been amazing and I'm really enjoying it. I can't wait until we can travel again and I can get out into the Dolomites and the mountains and really do some exploring out there. It should be an amazing summer, I hope. So I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where to ride next.